Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me apologize for us not having done an episode of our state-of-the-art radio program in a while. Things have been quite hectic, and as you are well aware, we are deeply into the holiday season at this current juncture in time, so I just haven't had the time to bring you radio aviation excellence, the Wright Flyer, as I have been able to in the past. Now that we've got that initial preliminary housekeeping out of the way, I want to discuss some of the stories that are happening right now and have a heart-to-heart conversation with you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. We know that tomorrow is the pivotal day for the great state of Alabama that is having their special election in order to fill the Senate seat that was left vacant by Jeff Sessions stepping into his role as Attorney General for these United States of America. And that's been, over the course of the past several successive weeks, a very hot-button issue. And the reason that it's a hot-button issue is ever since the Harvey Weinstein Hollywood sexual scandals managed to capture the attention of the mainstream or mainstay culture, there has been a bit of a witch hunt that goes on with respect to allegations of sexual misconduct and impropriety, as well as abuse and harassment. And the reason I say it's a witch hunt, I'm not trying to take away from real victims of sexual abuse or harassment, but there's always been a sense of a need for proof when it comes to these sorts of things, because it's basically discussing the individual character of a person. And we know that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have always engaged in character assassination. That's been one of their arrows in their quiver of arrows to use to attack their political rivals, adversaries, and opponents ad infinitum for as far back as I can recall in my relatively brief lifespan here on God's green earth. But the reason I say it's a witch hunt is we just go forth and accept what the accusers say without proof. Now, granted, this technically isn't part of the legal sphere, meaning that it's not part of the court system, that no one's going to take the Alabama GOP Senate candidate and former Chief Justice of the Alabama State Supreme Court into court with allegations of this. It's more of being in the court of public opinion. And these are accusations that go back decades. We're talking almost 40 years ago against Judge Roy Moore, that these ladies were saying that he was inappropriate with them. But here's the problem I have. If he is a serial sexual abuser, as so many, both on the left and right, have attempted to come forth and say he is, those types of people don't usually ever stop their ill ways. And that means that, okay, why is it that all of the instances of allegations are strictly from the period of the late 1970s? To me, there's got to be more to it than that. Where are the people from the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s up to today? Because the way I see it right now, it's just not there. And then when you have one of the myriad of accusers that came forth at the same time in what seems like a coincidence, and I know that my first officer, Jeremy Gravementon, and I have stated this before on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program, that we just don't believe in coincidences in this line of work. Where were they? Why didn't they come out when he was running for state office? Or when he was going to be seated on the highest state court in the state of Alabama? Because in law even, there is something known as character and fitness. I, as a licensed attorney, had to pass something known as character and fitness. It means that I could not properly become an officer of the court if there was any impropriety or any of those sorts of issues of moral turpitude, which sexual harassment and impropriety is, then I wouldn't be allowed to be licensed. Now, if it is true that more inappropriately engaged with these women, then yeah. But I need proof. I don't just want to go on a witch hunt. You see, the reason I compare this to the Salem witch trials of colonial Massachusetts is because that was a case where several women sat down and essentially started engaging in accusations, pointing the accusatory fingers at people that were outliers within society, people who were not usually accepted as part of the mainstay culture. They were strange, and basically accused them of witchcraft. And the proof didn't have to be there. They had the book of evidence of that time, which was known as the Hammer of Witches in Latin, or the Malus Maleficarum, that would allow spectral evidence, meaning that, well, the ghost of my sister's cow woke up one morning and told me that she, that witch down the lane, she put a hex and curse on my livestock, my crop, what have you. And it was enough for them to utilize certain tests. One of the favorite legal tests of that time was, if you were accused of witchcraft, they would throw you into the river. If you sank and died, basically drowned, then clearly you were innocent. But if you were able to swim or float, that meant that they believed witches' bodies were made out of wood and that you'd float. But essentially, those who were accused had no chance of survival. None. And they killed women, children, and old men. In fact, one of the famous stories was of an old man who was reciting the Lord's Prayer as they were pressing him to death between large boulders. And you see, that was contrary to what the legal standards of the time for these types of cases stated. They said that if you were a witch or a warlock, you should not be able to recite the Lord's Prayer, because that was the prayer that Jesus handed down to us as an explanation as to how we should say prayer. So if you could recite the words of the Lord's Prayer, then you couldn't have been in league with the devil. At least that was the mindset at the time. But the hysteria went so far that Pastor Paris, the man whose children started the accusations after acting strangely, when they accused his wife, that's when he put an end to it. It went too far. It turned into a wildfire type of witch hunt in which so many innocent people were lost. That is the kind of mentality that has started to take root in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave as I sit here, speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. Why? Because we are not looking at proof or evidence. We're not looking at the old notion of Reagan, trust but verify. Instead, it's instantly chase someone out just at the mere appearance of an allegation. And to my mind, that's a dangerous position for us to be in. And I say it's dangerous because there are the dark and twisted and, dare I say, nefarious forces that we have colloquially named here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, as the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are continuing to use the doctrine of cultural Marxism, which was developed by the Frankfurt School in the interwar periods between World War I and World War II. Essentially, what the faculty at the Frankfurt School sat down and attempted to do was to figure out why it was that a Bolshevik-style revolution never took heart in World War I era Germany as it did in what was then the Soviet Union. Because we know that the October Revolution of 1917 is what brought an end to Andrew Krasinski's provisional socialist government, and then brought about the rise of the Bolsheviks, the Marxist Bolsheviks under Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. And the Frankfurt School wanted that type of communism or Marxism to take root in Germany. But the thing they had discovered, Germany being a rather young country, as Otto von Bismarck was the one that brought it together in the 1870s, after the Franco-Prussian War. In fact, the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, where at the end of World War I, the peace treaty of that conflict would be signed, was where Wilhelm I was crowned Kaiser of a unified Germany. Before that, the German principalities had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So they had carved off a separate niche of about 13 principalities that were then unified under that doctrine. But the Frankfurt School wanted to know why, in the wake of that, were the German people not opening their hearts, souls, and minds to Bolshevik-style Marxism. And the reason they discovered was that there was a cultural sense within the budding middle class in Germany, because Germany was, even after the war, still one of the most industrialized nations in Europe. And they found that the German working class had a cultural work ethic that made them inherently and naturally suspicious of any type of communist government. They wanted to have private property. And that makes sense. We here in the land of the free and the home of the brave view the right to keep and hold private property as one of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. In fact, when Jefferson so famously penned those damn near poetic words in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain fundamental and unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," it is the pursuit of happiness part that actually translates into private property. That comes from the English philosopher John Locke, who essentially said life, liberty, and property. So they figured what they had to do, they couldn't just go forth with the traditional economic model of Marxism. They had to find a way to undermine the culture that made people inherently suspicious of Marxist ideology and thought. And so they came up with the notion of cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is designed to undermine the tenets of a society's culture. Because when you start attacking the well-established and time-honored values, institutions, but above all traditions within a nation, you can then truly begin to progressively and incrementally destabilize and ultimately undermine that society, destroying it from within, thereby allowing yourself to build a new culture or society. And that's what happened with Chairman Mao Zedong in China, with the Chinese Cultural Revolution of the late 40s and early 50s, where they attempted to erase or eradicate China's long and illustrious history before communism took over in 1948. And the same type of thing happened with cultural Marxism. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it is the same sort of path or approach that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists utilize. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Bible for the Fabian socialists, Rules for Radicals, by that chief pontificate of Fabian socialism, Saul Alinsky. It's the same tactic. It's the same strategy. And we see it play out time and time again in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours for generation after successive generation. And it's not about to let up, at least not within the foreseeable future. Now they're going to use different terms. It's now progressivism. It's now saying that identity politics is all about protecting disparate and discrete minorities. You see, that's always been the line of thinking that they propose or push forth. And again, it is a clearly erroneous line of thinking, but it is the one that they use. They utilize it in that way because they see that as a way to break down the fundamental elements of who we are, both as a nation and people. And so they're going to double down on that. Now, how does this tie in to Roy Moore? The same way it did with Al Franken. I don't like Al Franken. But I think that what we have seen with him going forth in front of the cameras, the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media to step down, but then to point the finger of accusation at Trump and Alabama GOP Senate candidate Roy Moore, it's hip with hypocrisy. The whole thing's dripping with hypocrisy. Same thing with John Conyers. The fact of the matter is, there have been tools and methods in place to allow these sorts of impropriety to be reported, and yet people hold back. Now, they're going to say that it's because they're going to, be embarrassed by having to face scrutiny, and that all of these high and mighty people steeped in the ancient patriarchy, the way things work. I certainly don't believe that the feminists clearly have a working knowledge of what this country's about. The justice system is there. The rape shield laws are there. And part of the whole thing about the rape shield laws is the accusers can go forth and make their accusations, and they're not supposed to have their name released to the public. And we saw how damaging false accusations can be. Look at the Duke Lacrosse case. Look at the report that at the University of Alabama, I believe this was a year or two back, where a fraternity was forced to shut down because a woman made false claims and later came forth and admitted that she was merely seeking attention. To my mind, that's dangerous. It's dangerous when the court of public opinion, which does not have the same restrictions or strict rules of evidence that a court at law does, is now allowed to destroy people's careers, character, and image without even a scintilla of evidence. That's got to stop. But that's identity politics. That ties directly into the cultural Marxism that was developed by the Frankfurt School in the interwar period. And so that is continuing. That has not changed. And it is not going to change. But part of it goes down to an ulterior motive. And that ulterior motive is one of utilizing the tried and true, albeit threadbare, tactic and strategy of divide and conquer in the hopes of pitting American citizen against American citizen. And for what purpose? What is the end goal that they are hoping to achieve? Well, again, it falls back to what the Frankfurt School had developed. It's like I said, it's nothing new. We have seen this to the point of it reaching ad nauseum, because this is what the left is dedicated to. It's what the left has always been dedicated to. And so it means that we have to be cognizant and aware of the fact that these sorts of dangers are there and that they are working against us. And yes, folks, these people are not going to stop. They see no reason to stop because they believe they see a proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, and that means that their victory is within grasp. And so just rushing out to condemn people without proof is akin to what happened in the Salem witch trial. We need the evidence. We need to know that the charges are true because people's reputations are on the line. Now, I've already heard this go through the annals of social media that, well, this is about a political election, not about someone's rights. And if you're going to try and besmirch the accusers that have come up, who have been virtually lionized, then whoever is defending themselves or is saying that these allegations are false, clearly they're lying and they shouldn't, they're just not fit for office. Well, now you actually are starting to deprive someone of their ability to act as an American citizen. You see, due process and equal protection under the law applies. And if you're going to tell somebody that they are not fit, then you're going to deprive the voters from having their say. If you're going to tell them to step down, or you're going to say you're going to instantly remove them once they are elected, which is what Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, had originally stated. It's what so many within the Senate had originally stated. Then that violates the tenets of federalism and our representative Republican form of government. Now, Article 4, Section 4 of our shared United States Constitution states in no uncertain terms that we have to promote and preserve a federalist republic. It's very difficult to do that when you have people that are out there saying instantly that someone should just immediately step down because they are merely accused of engaging in bad acts. You see, there's something about that denies equal protection under the law. There's something about that just goes to the heart of who we are as a nation and people. And by ignoring these well-established traditions and notions as to who we are and what we are, that works against us time and again. Because the moment that we start to ignore that is a critical attribute of who we are as a nation and as a people, then we truly begin to allow ourselves to fall prey and victim to the sorts of traps that they have set. Again, we can ill afford to allow that to come into fruition here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. But so many are just caught up in the raw emotionalism of all of this that they turn a blind eye to the rule of law. They forget the time-honored and traditional notion that the United States is a nation of laws and not of men. We always have been, except we're starting to get away from that. And that's something that we just can't afford to keep doing. But the other attribute of all of this is it's a sign of just how much damage the notion of political correctness and identity politics has done to the overarching societal fabric and framework of these United States of America for generation after successive generation. Because we see that if this thing in New York that happened this morning was a terror attack, was at a bus terminal, then again, it's the same pattern. We keep doing the same thing over and over again ad infinitum, expecting a different resultant outcome. Why? That is the clinical definition of insanity. Why do we continue to do this pattern? It's because we have gotten into such a touchy-feely position to where we just have lost sight of what matters and why these things matter in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. We can ill afford to ignore this. We can ill afford to just sit back and act as though there are not threats there or that we somehow created that threat. You see, it all ties together. It is a multifaceted approach, what we'd call a shotgun approach in legal parlance, where they're going for it and attacking people. And they're doing it because they want to undermine the societal fabric and framework of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Folks, that has got to stop. That cannot be the way that liberty works from this point or any point forward, because it's dangerous. It's oh so dangerous. Why, oh why, at this critical juncture of our nation's relatively brief yet illustrious history on the face of God's green earth, would we sit back and allow these things to continue unfettered, unchecked, and unchallenged? We shouldn't. And so we see that tomorrow the election in Alabama is going to continue. And there's already been talk that if Roy Moore manages to win the seat, which in all probability he will, he's going to rush in to meet an ethics allegation, an ethics investigation by the Senate's Ethics Committee and Caucus. Fine. Do that. But do not deprive the people of Alabama their fundamental and inalienable God-given right to vote, to have a say in our system of polity. Do not strip and deprive them of their Republican form of government, because that is what so many are attempting to do when they say he should just step down, or that he should be removed, or that he should resign. No, if the people, the constituents of that particular jurisdiction have made their decision, that's their say. Let them decide at the ballot box come the next electoral cycle. That is how the land of the free and the home of the brave has always worked. And it is part of the reason why we are not a direct democracy. In fact, a direct democracy would be an unmitigated disaster for the type of country and people that we are. It means that everything would go up for a vote. We'd never get anything done. We'd never be able to secure the rights and liberties of innocent people. No, it requires that we stay steadfast and firm to protect the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of each sovereign individual of these United States of America. That is just who we are and who we have always been. And it is something that we can ill afford to get away from. Because the moment that we start to try to think that we can get away from it, or the moment that we start to give this up so that we can, feel good about ourselves, that is the moment that we begin to undermine the societal framework and fabric that is the longest contiguous or uninterrupted standing constitutional endowed federalist republic and the entire course of human events. Again, these are things that cannot be ignored. Yet, the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are not reflecting upon it in that way. They're not thinking about it that way. They're not conveying that truth to the public. And the reason they're not is because of this deep, driving, ulterior motive and agenda that has been propelling them for well over a century and a half now. No, we can ill afford to allow these dark, twisted, and nefarious forces to have their way, to have carte blanche, to fundamentally, permanently, and irreparably transform these United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed federalist representative republic into some sort of a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist nightmare dystopia torn straight from the pages of an Orwellian novel. Because that's what this is boiling down to. That is what this is transforming into, and we can ill afford to allow that to transpire here. You see, it's as my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have oft times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Without our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, we are truly left with nothing. Stop and think about that for a moment. Just how significantly important this is. Of the utmost paramount importance that this holds for the good and decent people of the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's staggering. The magnitude that this holds, the impact that this has, not just for ourselves, but for our posterity, in other words, for the up-and-coming generations, and even more important still, for those generations that have yet to be born, then that will make it all the more clear as to what it is that we are supposed to do. The way that we can secure the blessings of liberty is for us to have and foster a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Those are that important. Those are that crucial and critical as to who we are as a nation and people and where we truly want this nation to go from this point forward. And I realize that that is a difficult thing to do, particularly in this fast-paced modern society in which we live today. I know that we are busy trying to build up and carve out the standard and quality of life that we have grown accustomed to for generation after successive generation. And part of the whole Fabian socialist plan is to make it nigh impossible for us to do that. You see, they've always been about using overzealous and draconian regulation through that out-of-control leviathan of an administrative state that is ultimately unaccountable to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people of the United States. Because that way they can distract us, they can pit us against one another, they can do all of the dark, twisted, and dare I say, nefarious things that they have wanted to do over the course of the past 150 plus years. That is an integral part of who they are, and ladies and gentlemen, that is not about to change at any point, at least within the foreseeable future, because again, they think they have managed to utilize the tried and true, albeit threadbare tactic and strategy of divide and conquer to undermine all that we hold near and dear in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and they're not too far wrong. When you see the sorts of hysteria that break out on university campuses from coast to coast and border to border in this great republic of ours, when you see that we no longer require proof that mere allegations of sexual impropriety, abuse, misconduct, and harassment can be weaponized, then yes, we have a problem. It's the same reason that these people go forth and attempt to tear down the shared history of these United States of America. Again, it all boils down to a central hatred that they have for the time-honored values, institutions, but above all traditions of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Why? Well, it's because they want to tear down the Constitution. Why do they want to tear down the Constitution? Because they loathe and despise the ability of people to think and to act and to work for themselves. You see, the end goal is power. That's what it has always been about with these people. They want the power to control the facets of our daily lives. And they want that come hell or high water. They will not divorce themselves from this dark and twisted ideology that they have committed themselves to. And that's part of the reason also why we see hyper-politicization occurring within the land of the free and the home of the brave. It is because they want to politicize everything. They want the dark, dirty, and seedy game of politics to be a central, integral part of our lives. That way, political correctness, moral relativism, and all of the Fabian doctrines can thereby be utilized to further divide and diminish the integrity and the cohesive nature of the United States of America. You see, even Nikita Khrushchev had said, we don't have to do anything to destroy the United States. The United States will destroy itself from within. And that is certainly what appears to be the case. It's certainly the domestic enemy from within that is threatening to destroy all the achievements that we have made in our nation's relatively brief yet illustrious history in the entirety of the course of human events. And they're excited about that. They salivate over that. And they say it's because we lionize certain people that are undeserving of it, that we give attention to white supremacists, which I don't think that the vast majority of the American people see that way. But again, if we do start going down that path, and if we do begin to hyperventilate and focus on that, then we are playing into the hands of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists that are utilizing cultural Marxism through the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism. And one of the sub-branches of political correctness is identity politics. It's that dark, seedy, ugly, dangerous mentality where we don't recognize our fellow popular sovereigns as American citizens. No, we try and hyphenate who we are. We can't do that. Because the moment that we start to do that is the moment that we begin to deny that we are a nation of laws and not of men. It means that we start looking to prescribe special rights at the expense of other people's rights. And that is strictly prohibited by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the Ninth Amendment to the Bill of Rights, to the Constitution, or the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. No, that cannot stand. That cannot be the way that this nation goes forward. Why? Because our nation recognizes equal protection under the law. That means you cannot have specialized classes. Unfortunately, we've gotten away from that. And the judicial system has been part of that problem, but it's certainly been within the information media sources and outlets, and through our education. The ivory tower of academia on university campuses from coast to coast and border to border are peddling identity politics. That's why you see this push for so-called safe spaces. That's why you see the further entrenchment of identity politics in such a way as to further divide us. Because again, that's the end goal. That's what they are attempting to accomplish. And they're somewhat successful. But at the same time, we see that they play fast and loose with the truth. Look at what happened with Brian Ross, the chief investigative reporter at ABC News, who published a totally falsified and uncorroborated story about the Michael Flynn aspect of the Russian probe. And it was just a dangerous thing. It had implications on the stock market. It had implications on what this country could do about the security of our elections. It thrust it into a new level. It thrust it into a dangerous level that disregards the purpose of why we even have a free press in the first place. So you see, when you go forth and you lie about a story, and when you accept allegations without proof, it's part and parcel of the same thing. It's part of the problem that we are encountering in modern America. And again, it's something that the ramifications of it, the repercussions of it, will be felt for many generations to come. We can ill afford to ignore this. We ignore it at our own plight. And I'm not ready to do that. I'm not ready to give up on the belief that truth is still an integral part of who we are. Because the moment that we do that again, we begin to give in to those dark, twisted, and nefarious forces that loathe and despise us, and have loathed and despised us for all this time. I would much rather us remain the land of the free and the home of the brave than to fall back into Star Chamber type situation where you are not allowed to face your accuser, where you are allowed to be stripped and deprived of your human decency, dignity, and individuality just on the basis of an uncorroborated and unsubstantiated allegation in and of itself. That does not work. It is not who we are, and it is not a part of what we have valued in these United States of America, dating back to this nation's inception some 237 plus years ago. We just can't do this. Why do we do this to ourselves? We do it because we have grown a bit complacent. We have started to act in a way to where we ignore our duties, obligations, but above all, our responsibilities in our individual capacity as American citizens. Think back to what's contained in the clear and concise language within the four corners of the preamble to our entire Constitution. One of the things that it says that we, in our individual capacity as United States citizens, are obligated to do is to secure the blessings of liberty not only for ourselves, but also for our posterity. In other words, for the up-and-coming generations, but even more importantly still, for those generations which have yet to be born. Now, are we doing that? When we go forth with these flagrant Salem witch trial style trials in the court of public opinion, where we demand people sacrifice themselves on the mere basis of allegation alone without a process to look into this? Because again, I find that to be highly suspect. It's highly speculative. It's highly disingenuous. It's highly dangerous. Because again, the United States is a nation of laws and not of men. So if we continue to put on the blinders and continue to embrace mass hysteria, we are continuing to undermine the integrity of our representative Republican form of government. And again, I do not think we can afford to allow that to come into fruition. Certainly not without a fight. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, there is going to be a fight for this. It is going to be a long, drawn-out affair. Because there is so much ground that we have to make up, and we are going to be facing opposition from either side of the political spectrum. That is a self-evident truth that we're going to have to face. But we can overcome it by fostering that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. It has to be that way. It has to be the people that save this country. No one else can. No one else has the power or the authority or the wherewithal to do that. And that is by the inherent design of these United States of America. It is an integral as well as fundamental aspect and attribute that we possess in our individual capacity as American citizens, and we should embrace that. We should embrace that as a good thing, a good and decent attribute of our shared national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity as Americans. But you see, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have been attacking this incessantly and with increasing ferocity for generations now. And the right has not necessarily been very effective at combating it, because I believe there are those on the right who want that type of power, manipulation, corruption, but above all, control. To be able to control the facets of our daily lives, to dictate how we live our lives, to dictate what we can or cannot do. And that is so contrary to the foundational spirit of these United States of America that it is shocking and staggering that we even have to consider that, particularly on those who claim to be members of the party of limited government and the party of individual liberty. Why, again, do we not come together as a nation of people, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, to stand up for and to protect our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights? You see, unless and until we do so, and unless and until we have an open and honest civil discourse about this, in the free marketplace of ideas, these problems are only going to fester, and they're only going to be exacerbated with each successive passing day. I certainly wish that wasn't the case, but when we examine the great weight of the evidence under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity, that is the picture that continues to paint itself. That is the inescapable truth that is unfurling within the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. And again, it is our duty, obligation, but above all responsibility as American citizens to fix it. But by allowing our system of polity to basically devolve to the point of being a mere spectator sporting event, we have fallen so directly into the hands of those very frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are doing everything within their power to undermine all that we hold near and dear in these United States of America. And it is such a tragedy that it has occurred. And it means, above all else, that we really do have our work cut out for us. We really do have to put our nose to the grindstone and think for ourselves. Attempt to root out the truth for ourselves, not just to believe the stories that are peddled by media sources, by pundits, by these various news agencies and outlets, because there's always an agenda. But Alexis de Tocqueville put it best. In America, you can have strange and bizarre things out in the news. You can have extremist views, and it's not going to threaten the integrity of the Republic, because the people know they have the freedom of speech, and that there is a free press. And that with that couches the duty and obligation to think about it thoroughly, completely and totally for yourself, to parse through the news and information that is disseminated by these groups, and make up your own mind. You see, more freedom has always been a guiding light for the United States, not less, more. So all of the restrictiveness, all of these attempts to say that we need to do this to prevent people from becoming offended or from feeling oppressed, well, no, oppression's bad, sure. But there needs to be direct proof. There needs to be a direct connection with, or privity, as we call it in law, with these claims before action can be taken. And we shouldn't just sit back and allow the proclamations of a few to silence the voices of the voters of any particular state. You have to have the ethics process in place. That's why it's there. That's why there's a review to it. And it goes through evidentiary standards because it is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that it almost has the binding effect of a court at law, but not quite. That is what matters. The rule of law and the equal protection under the law, which provides for equal application of the law, and protecting the ability of people's character from being assassinated just because people go forth. It's the same as those bakers that didn't want to bake a cake for gay weddings being forced to shut down. That, too, is part of the hysteria. But that one goes into the court at law. Well, the court at law begins to undermine its standards when we, as a nation and people, begin to undermine the standards that we apply to the facets of our daily lives. It's as that great, sagacious founding father, Sam Adams, said, that if the United States of America wanted to thrive and flourish as a representative republic, it was absolutely vital that the people be a virtuous people. So yes, I say go forth with an ethics investigation. Make sure that these claims against Roy Moore are unfounded. But the burden of proof lies on the accuser. That has always been the case. And that's what we need to see. But as it stands now, I'm not so sure we are going to see it. We can certainly hope so. That's certainly the approach that we, as good and decent citizens of these United States of America, should, take, because that will help secure the time-honored values, institutions, and traditions that we know and love in this country, and have known and loved in this country, dating back to its inception some 237 plus years ago. Folks, the decision on the direction of this nation in the future, the trajectory that it will be on, lies squarely in our hands and our hands alone. Now, with that said, it's time to begin our descent I'm going to send the flight attendant back for one last round of eggnog for those of you who are ready for the holiday spirit. If she refuses to pour it, or to give you the proper proportion of bourbon, you can accuse her of this and then push her out of the plane. As always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, we couldn't do the show without you. On top of this, I invite you to follow us on our Google Plus page, or to leave comments, questions, concerns, or even topic suggestions in the comment section here on our YouTube page. Or you can even follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, that's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. You will find the Blogspot account that is just chock full of useful information. And just as you will in the explanation section here, or on YouTube, you will also find a link to the Cafe Press account. Now, folks, at the Cafe Press account, we have all sorts of novelty items, trinkets, and goodies. You know, hats, shirts, shoes, apparel, neckties, mugs, thermoses, drinking glasses, shot glasses, laptop sleeves and protectors, smartphone sleeves and protectors, as well as tote bags, bumper stickers, jewelry, watches, clocks, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo on it, or the First Class Passenger logo on it, or the two Uplifting America logos. Those are all there, and they're all at reasonable prices. Give us a little bit of support. They make great and perfect stocking stuffers as we are fast approaching Christmas. Can you believe it is approximately 2 weeks away? I know, it's hard for me to believe as well. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for joining us today at the Wright Flyer. We hope to see you again next time. Please do take care, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.